all that, I want to thank both of them for inviting me. It makes a big difference when you're invited this. But if I can, it probably would just be a little bit easier for me just to highlight a couple of things that went on last year. A couple of things I think we're going to focus on next year, where we are, and just open it for questions. I think really what's on your mind is more important than what I have to say. So, obviously we got accountability reform through. I think that was when I was knocking on doors throughout the whole campaign. That was probably the number one thing. I'll tell you just anecdotally, I had the two questions I had during the entire campaign that seemed to be the most prevalent. One, where are you on accountability? And obviously every candidate's smart enough and we're all for it. But sort of how are you for it and how are you willing to fight for it? Was I think the clear answer. The other was, where are you on economics? And I don't bring that up against the senator at all, but it was just a clear dividing line. I think they had said, this is where we are, and he had backed one of my focus. And I think he is wise to redistrict out of my district. Most of my district is no longer in his. And the reaction there was strong. They wanted someone with more clear and concise measures. The accountability was large. Tax reform is starting to come. It's not that it hasn't been on the radar, it just hasn't been on the forefront of the House. A few years ago, the House and the Senate funded. How many of you have read anything about the track commission? Just read the report. The report was, I thought, very well done. I thought it was a really good report. But sadly, at the last minute, they said that the intent was, let's let the experts come in, see what we need to do. And what they had done, I think, was they did a fair job of eliminating a lot of loopholes and trying to lower rates across the board. But instead of doing a BRAC type track, they didn't do an up and down vote. As soon as they decided not to force a vote, you're not going to force the will of the House and Senate. It just became dust on a shelf, and that's all it's going to be. The Speaker has appointed a Republican Tax Study Committee. I'm blessed to be on that. Mac Tool here is also on that, so is Rick Quinn. So Lexington's well represented. There's only about 12 people. We had a good group from the Fair Tax come and present to us on Monday, and they did an excellent job. And I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. We have 63 co-sponsors, which basically means that at any moment we recall it from the committee and begin the debate. Now, I'm not the leader on the bill. I don't pretend to be. I know what it does. I'm very supportive. But there are others that, quite frankly, are the leader who've been in this for a long time. And I've asked them time and time again, when are we going to get to it? And they have just said, we're not ready, it's not ready, that kind of thing. And that the leadership in both the House and the Senate have basically said, we want this to happen, maybe not fair tax as introduced, but something to happen. But it wasn't last session. I think last session they were trying to get through an awful lot of other bills. We had a Republican agenda, a number of bills that were literally passed every Wednesday, each week on Wednesday, all the way through to the 1st of April, mid-April. The ones that I think were the most exciting, if you will, things like accountability reform. We also had immigration reform. I thought that was important. It was not that South Carolina's law was a poor law. We actually have a very strong law. But on the heels of what had happened in Arizona and the way the federal government reacted to that, I think it was important for South Carolina to stand up and say, we're not going to put up with this. In reality, the strengths of the bill were that it allows the police to stop without without discriminatory action and repercussion. And it also says that someone who's here illegally cannot apply for a job. Well, I think that's sort of a no-brainer, but it was not ever clarified in the law. My feeling on immigration is that if it's illegal, it's illegal. You don't have a debate over illegal immigration. It just is what it is. Now, what I believe we ought to do is we ought to make sure our visa system and our immigration system is reformed, because you have good people wanting to get to our shore and they're dying to do so. Let's allow those that are going to bring society up to come. Those that aren't, we don't need. I'm for cutting off the border. and making sure that it's not porous, that it is very tight. But I'm also against people coming to our shores, committing criminal acts, and just simply being deported. That's wrong. I've always maintained that we don't have a Department of Corrections, we have a Department of Prisons, and that people who commit criminal acts, whether they're U.S. citizens or not, should spend a lot of time in those. And that we can always get them to put bricks on top of bricks and let them deal with the consequences. So illegal immigration is illegal, and we should be right there. The voter ID bill is one of the most contentious, racially charged bills we dealt with over a year. 2 years ago, I believe it was, the Black Caucus walked out. What an opportunity for Republicans to start throwing out bills that they could have easily gotten through, but they wisely said that's not fair, this was a protest, and they allowed that to happen. This year, the caucus did not walk out. They were wise not to do so. Ran a few things through. But I truly wanted to find out why it was that they were so adamant, because I don't believe that most of the members of the Black Caucus want to commit fraud or want some perpetual bad thing to happen in the voting booth. A number of them, to their credit, it was more of a Jim Crow type of thing. They had the poll tax, they had Jim Crow laws. It felt like this was yet another obstacle. And what I tried to explain was that I understand that you've got to get past history and start looking to the future. The speeches you hear on the floor from a number of our Democratic colleagues is all about the past. How shameful we have been and all these things. Okay, fine. We've already gotten past that. Most of us have. Let's move to the future. They won't do it. I think that's too bad. But on the voter ID, my explanation to the constituents that contacted me and questioned me, I would question that most of them probably didn't support me in the election when they were doing it, was it's a constitutional right that I'm going to defend. Voting is our fundamental right. We aren't willing to protect it and make sure the person that is voting is eligible to do so. Then we might as well just get it all away. And I'm afraid that's what we're fighting for, but it just got lost. I've often said that Republicans have a 2-minute explanation on everything. Democrats get a 30-second soundbite. And they're starting to say the same thing in some of the circles back at us. But that was, I think, a large part of it. The one that excited me the most, though, is, and the House has passed it time and time again, and I'm very hopeful that something will happen this year, and that really is the spending cap. The House has passed a spending cap. We voted on that early. And then during the debate on the budget, it's real easy to live within your means when you don't have as much. So your spending cap was within our means, if you will. So we had a $5 billion budget, and our spending cap is basically CPI plus alert. Then we give ourselves about a 3 to 4% cushion. We came in at about 1.8, and a lot of that was done for pay down of debt and some other things. But initially, we were going to be about $2 to $300 billion, $2 to $300 million for the federal government's math stuff on right now, over our own spending cap. And there were a number of us that went to we knew he was retiring, then chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and said, we're not going to be spending this budget when it comes in over the cap that we passed previously, only 6 weeks before, maybe 5 weeks before. And they really felt like there were some threats. And we said, we didn't get elected by you. We're all on committees. We'll be on those committees next year as well. So they had to do something pretty quick and still override. That excites me mainly because I live within my means. My mortgage is my biggest fear. If something happens, then perhaps maybe I bought too much house. Maybe I've downsized before, I've lost a job before, so I know that side of it. State government's not much different than the federal government. We've overspent. It drives me crazy. During the campaign, starting a year and a half ago, I complained that we had $1 billion surplus, and where did it go? Now we're complaining at the state level that we're at $5.2 billion. There are needs out there. We want to meet those needs. But at the same time, I'm sorry, I don't care if it's growth of government or if it's growth of just simply budgetary factors, it's still not our money. And that's probably the biggest disappointment as a freshman in the State House has been how quickly not only re-elected officials, tenured people, if you will, but some of the freshmen already are saying, well, this will be a loss of revenue. And you're thinking, where's the problem? I mean, and that's what I'm getting the sense on the tax study committee already that we may not be able to go down that line because that's a loss of revenue. And again, I keep thinking that's not the problem. The problem is when you start thinking that way. We had a presenter a number of weeks ago came in and basically said that South Carolina has on the books taxes valued at something like $8 billion. So we're giving away $8 billion in all these exemptions and things like that. I don't have a problem with exemptions. Not in the sense that it's revenue we're not collecting. I have a problem that is so out of whack now that you have these exemptions that are making you and I spend more. We're exempting things that at one time might have been important, but now are silly. We exempt wine. I don't know why. I don't really care. 80 years ago they exempted wine. It's still on the books. Okay, but that's not what raising the revenue. That's like $300,000. To me, that's a lot of money, but to the state, it's a big number. But what that does is that says if we're going to fund government at its current level, we're going to have to raise revenues or collect revenues in other areas at a higher percentage. The fair tax, Norma and I went back and forth on this. I asked an awful lot of questions before I signed on. And my biggest fear is if you're going to eliminate the income tax and replace it with sales tax, make sure that income tax goes away. Make sure it doesn't just sort of go away. Constitutionally ban it or make sure that it is zeroed out. We don't want that again. In the debate, the fair tax, we